All right, I do believe we are now live. Welcome, everyone. It is the Black Brain Trust Black Cannabis Talk, episode 234. It is myself, Complex Design, along with Anti-Gravity. What's going on, bro?
I'm doing good, man. How's everyone?
Doing good, man. Doing good. It's a Sunday evening.
Mhm.
Feels pretty good, so I'm sitting outside, just hanging out here. Feels pretty nice. You said it's raining there?
Yeah, we got some showers, so hopefully it clears out.
All right, how's the as far as the temps go? I heard like in places like Chicago, man, it's still like it's kind of like winterish, kind of maybe sort of. It's still like sweater
Oh,
weather and stuff there, man.
we're in the 60s because of the rain, but yeah, I mean, honestly, I prefer that
You do?
other than it being super hot. But it'll be in the 90s by the Saturday.
Now to that, I'm gonna say nice. It was like
Well,
101 today,
well,
and
for us, it's not like dry heat. It's humid. You know what I mean?
oh yeah, that's right. You guys got the humid heat going on over
So
there.
yeah, even though it's like 60 degrees, it feels more like 70, closer to 80.
Yeah, and then it's just that whole prospect of like the clothes like literally sticking to you, and like no matter what you do, you just can't seem to like
Mhm.
get dry.
Right, right.
Right. Um, so we'll go ahead and get started here, man. Do you guys do you see the article there? Is everything is it showing?
Okay, now it's showing up for the YouTube audience, so we're good.
Okay, gotcha. Hey, just real quick, man, check out that ad on the top there.
Ah, exactly. This is the game, man. It's a good
Yeah, and it's
game.
on Newsweek too. Oh, check that out, dude. Yeah, man, they're advertising CBD on Newsweek, huh?
Right.
Just to little things like that stand out that just kind of let you know, man, like just where all this shit's going now. Like Newsweek is accepting weed advertisements. All right, so we're gonna get started here, man. First item on the docket here is cannabis ingredient CBD could one day become an antibiotic. All right, so as scientists work to stem the tide of antibiotic resistance, the authors of a study believe an ingredient in cannabis could one day form the basis of a new drug. Antibiotic or antimicrobial resistance is where bugs such as bacteria can survive drugs created to kill them, making infections difficult or impossible to treat. Scientists in Australia found cannabidiol, the non psychoactive ingredient in marijuana, killed all the strains of bacteria they tested in a lab, including some which are highly resistant to existing antibiotics. What's more, the bacteria did not become resistant to the drug after exposed for 20 days, the period when bacteria can survive some currently used drugs. The team tested a group of bacteria called gram-positive staph aureus, which causes conditions including the hospital bug MRSA or strep, basically, which led to pneumonia, as well as E. faecalis, which can be life threatening in those with weak immune systems. The research also used the substance in mice and found in a preliminary study it was effective in treating a skin infection. Study leader Mark Blaskovich, senior research chemist at the Center for Superbug Solutions, told Newsweek, "We still don't know how it works, and it may have a unique mechanism of action given it works against bacteria that have become resistant to other antibiotics, but we still don't know how. So far, we have only shown it works topically on the skin surface. To be really useful, it would be good if we could show that it treated systemic infections, i.e., pneumonia, or complicated tissue infections, where you have to give it orally or by intravenous dosing. A very preliminary study didn't show that it works in these more difficult models. Addressing the issue of antibiotic resistance more widely, he said the study shows there may be compounds that could be used as antibiotics that haven't been properly studied, he said. The most challenging part of the study was getting the correct permits to handle cannabidiol in our laboratories, as the Queensland government regulates who can use and handle it, even though the material we are using is completely synthetic. Hmm. It falls into this gray area under the definitions of cannabinoids, he explained. The findings were presented at the annual conference of the American Society of Microbiology, ASM Microbe 2019 in San Francisco, and have not been published in a peer-reviewed study. Asked for his advice for those who might see the study as an excuse to ditch regular antibiotics in favor of using cannabis-based home remedies, he responded, "Don't. Most of what we have shown has been done in test tubes. It needs a lot more work to show it would be useful to treat infections in humans. It would be very dangerous to try and treat a serious infection with cannabidiol instead of one of the tried and tested antibiotics," he stressed. Dr. Andrew Edwards, a non-clinical lecturer in molecular microbiology at the Imperial College London, who was not involved in the research, told Newsweek the antibacterial properties of cannabidiol hadn't been appreciated previously, and it's significant that there appears to be activity against antibiotic-resistant strains. Cannabidiol is already well characterized in terms of human use, he said. This is important because if cannabidiol is found to be effective in treating infection, it could be fast-tracked into clinics. Critiquing the study, Edwards emphasized the work is in its early stages and that the substance only works in gram-positive bacteria. It is not effective against gram-negative bacteria, which are especially difficult to develop new antibiotics for because they have a very selective outer membrane that prevents most drugs from entering the bacterial cell. What are your thoughts on this, Noah?
Yeah, I think they're going to have to loosen up the regulations, the unnecessary regulations, so that people can research, these scientists can research it. Because, penicillin and other antibiotic-resistant bacteria is a serious problem. Particularly, not so much humans, even though, that is an issue, but for animals, right? Especially farm animals or like cattle, like especially pigs, right? I was reading about like a year ago in China, there were some bacteria in their pigs that was resistant to cholesterol, I believe it was called, which is the highest, antibiotic or the strongest antibiotic that we have in existence, right? There's nothing after that.
Right.
And there's already, bacteria that's resistant to it. So, we got to figure out another way to fight bacteria that don't require the current methods for that we're using for antibiotics, because it's a systemic risk on our food supply, because we rely heavily on antibiotics, and as well, there's not a lot of genetic diversity in the food that we consume. I think there's like 3 or 4 different types of chicken genetically, maybe a few more pigs. So if any of them get sick with a bacteria that we can't, cure it with, it's going to be disastrous.
And my take on it too is, a lot of what had kind of served as the basis for the medical cannabis industry here in California, especially during like sort of like the early stages, I would say from like 2005, right, when they approved like dispensaries, right, and people could kind of create their own tinctures and extracted oils and stuff like that. And there are all of these claims that so much of the stuff can do so many of these different things, and there was a lot of truth to a lot of it, and then there was also a lot of things that were a bit oversold. I don't see this as there being a stretch, quite frankly. I really don't, because cannabidiol or CBD is such a new thing, and it's largely just been relegated to like things like pain management and stuff like that. But there's also been studies that would suggest that or actually not even suggest, but it's shown to have a positive effect on things like diabetes and other types of ailments too. So I think it having an antibiotic type of characteristic, I don't think that there's much of a stretch out of that. I just really think it has to do more with like lab processes and how to synthesize it in such a way where it's ingested and taken specifically for antibiotic use. But I think it's pretty promising, and it kind of just speaks to where hemp, cannabis, CBD, all these different things are gonna largely become commonplace in the hemp and cannabis. Well, more specifically in the medicinal side of things. You know, so
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, and that's on the human end, but there also has to be more research in whether or not can also be used for different kinds of livestock animals, right? Because we depend on them for a lot of majority of our protein, right?
Right,
It's
right.
not like people are vegans, so they got to get their protein from animals, and so we're kind of in an arms race with bacteria, and it's not looking good. So we gotta start making moves.
Man, weed to the rescue.
Right. Exactly.
All right, we're gonna get into this next article here. This is and I apologize, folks. I just really didn't have much time to go and grab like some new strain to test out and give you guys a review. So we'll have to kind of circle back around to the strain review on the next Cannabis Hangout. But we'll go ahead and just discuss the news and a few other items. Now, real quickly before I get into this next article, I see Engineering Cannabis is in the chat. Dude, did you want to? I know he had talked about wanting to join us. Did you want to join us on the Hangout? Let us know.
If you do, just
let us know, man.
I'll keep an eye on the chat.
Yeah. And Damiete, Richard Victor Dixon, what's good, brother? JBA, Super Triz, what's good, fam? What's good? All right, so we're gonna get into the next item on the docket. This is from the Motley Fool: 3 potential catalysts that could cause Aurora cannabis stock to skyrocket. Those of you who are regulars to the Black Cannabis Hangouts know that we've discussed companies like Aurora and Canopy and a few other what we would call big weed. This is kind of like our take on like the big tobacco equivalents of the cannabis and marijuana markets. So Aurora definitely falls into the category of one of the big weed firms. So 3 potential catalysts that could cause Aurora cannabis stock to skyrocket. This is from Keith Spates from June 23rd. That's today. Aurora Cannabis's sizzle seems to have fizzled. The Canadian marijuana stock that more than doubled by the middle of March, or the Canadian marijuana stock more than doubled by the middle of March. Since then, though, Aurora has been giving up roughly half of its big gain. But don't think for a second that Aurora can't turn up the heat yet again. The company continues to pick up momentum in the Canadian adult use recreational pot market and in the international medical cannabis markets. It's also possible that Aurora could surpass its peak share price from a few months ago if the right scenarios unfold. Here are the 3 potential catalysts that could cause Aurora cannabis stock to skyrocket. Landing a big partner. Several of the top Canadian marijuana producers have landed big partners from outside the cannabis industry. Canopy Growth teamed up with the large alcoholic beverage maker Constellation Brands. You've heard us speak at length about that. Kronos Group secured a significant investment from tobacco giant Altria. Tilray partnered with big beer maker Anheuser-Busch InBev and drug maker Novartis. Hexo joined forces with another top beer company, Molson Coors. But Aurora has been left out in the cold so far when it comes to big partnerships. That could change in the near future, though. In March, Aurora bought billionaire investor Nelson Peltz on board to help line up partners. Peltz has especially strong connections in the consumer packaged goods industry. There is one catch. Aurora isn't looking to receive a big equity investment along the lines of deals made by Canopy and Kronos. If the company changed its tune and found a large partner willing to make a big investment, there's no doubt its stock would vault much higher. Even if Aurora doesn't get a lot of cash with the partnership, though, teaming up with one or more high-profile companies from outside the cannabis industry should light a fire beneath the stock. A major move into the U.S. hemp CBD market. Uh-oh. Aurora has also lags behind some of its peers in making a major move into the U.S. hemp cannabidiol market. Canopy Growth is building a large-scale hemp production facility in New York State. Tilray acquired top hemp food company Manitoba Harvest, whose products are sold at thousands of U.S. retailers. I do believe Manitoba Harvest does have products in like Whole Foods, if I'm not mistaken.
Where are they based out of the U.S. or Canada?
It's Tilray. Tilray I think they believe they're U.S. based. I'm not sure if Manitoba Harvest. I'm assuming, given the name, it's like kind of like a Canadian, a company founded in Canada. But
Yeah, because if they are that, I'm not. I'm kind of wondering how they're able to get across the border.
Well, I think it's because Tilray is a U.S. based company and they actually acquired the other company.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right, no, that makes sense. That makes sense.
Hexo hasn't entered the U.S. hemp market yet, but CEO Sebastian St. Louis recently stated the company will do so in 2020. In January, Aurora Chief Operating Officer Cam Batley told Business Insider that the company will be unveiling its hemp-derived CBD strategy to enter the U.S. market over the next few months. 5 months have passed, but we still don't know what Aurora's U.S. hemp strategy is. It's a secret. While estimates vary as to just how big the U.S. hemp CBD market will be, pretty much everyone agrees that there will be billions of dollars in annual sales within the next few years. If I recall, they're estimating like 2020 is supposed to be somewhere in the tune of like 12 to like 16 or 17 billion.
Whoa.
Should Aurora announce that it's entering the U.S. hemp CBD market in a small and meaningful way, I think the stock would take off. Significant progress on U.S. legalization of pot. While hemp is legal in the U.S. at the federal level, marijuana isn't. And as long as that remains the case, Aurora won't be able to jump into the U.S. marijuana market to keep its listings on the New York Stock Exchange and the Toronto Stock Exchange. But if significant progress is made toward changing U.S. laws about pot, most, if not all, marijuana stocks would get a huge boost. One of the largest Canadian cannabis producers, Aurora, would almost certainly be one of the biggest beneficiaries should this happen. There's already bipartisan support for revising federal marijuana laws. We have something on the docket. We're going to be touching on that here shortly. Legislation sponsored by Democrats and Republicans has been introduced in the U.S. Senate and House of Representatives. Although similar bills have been proposed in the past, only to die in committee, strong support among Americans for legalizing pot is higher than ever. Rating the odds. All it would take for Aurora's share price to skyrocket would be for one of these potential catalysts to become a reality. And if all three catalysts happen, the momentum for Aurora would probably be a sight to behold. But what are the odds that Aurora will actually enjoy a boost from any of these possible scenarios? I think the probability of Aurora landing at least one major partner from outside the cannabis industry is very high, at least 80%. Aurora wants to find a partner. It's working to find a partner. And based on statements made by some key leaders in the cannabis industry, notably including Hexo's CEO, there are a lot of big companies looking to make deals. My view is that the likelihood that Aurora will enter the U.S. hemp CBD market in the near future is also very good. I put the probability at 75% or so. Aurora realizes that the market could be big. However, the company is being cautious with the FDA in the process of finalizing regulations for hemp CBD. Still, I think we will know what Aurora's U.S. hemp CBD strategy is by the end of 2019. I know what our strategy is. What about the prospects for the U.S. changing federal marijuana laws in a way that allows Aurora to jump into the U.S. marijuana market? I suspect that the odds of it happening this year are pretty low, no more than 10%. I don't see Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell allowing a bill to be voted on the Senate floor that could negatively impact the hemp industry in his home state of Kentucky. And man, we have talked about that in the past, that a lot of the pushback that you see from a lot of like the Bible Belt states that are vehemently against marijuana legalization is largely due to the fact that they bought in to hemp cultivation. You see, so there's a bit of a schism between the two, because ultimately you can see how they're speaking to it in this article here. There kind of is two different markets. You know, if you really start to break down the nuts and bolts of hemp versus cannabis, there are two different markets, and there's two different industrial segments that we're looking at here. So, you know, people
Right, and now they're making money off it. That's number one reason.
That's the other thing, right? They've already started banking. So yeah, there may not be you know, such a hurry for them to kind of push something through, as revenues from hemp cultivation and processing start to make their way through, you know, the state coffers. The more timeline is extended, though, the higher the probability of federal marijuana laws being changed in a way that's favorable to Aurora, in my opinion. If my probabilities are anywhere close to being right, Aurora has a really good shot at benefiting from 2 out of the 3 of these potential catalysts in the relative near future. And if I'm right, Aurora cannabis stock could soon skyrocket. Newly released 10 stocks that we like better than Aurora Cannabis. Investing geniuses David and Tom Gardner revealed what they believe to be 10 best stocks for investors to buy right now, and Aurora Cannabis Incorporated isn't one of them. That's right. They think these 10 stocks, or I think this is a continuation on the article. The main thing I wanted to point out here, though, was this piece right here on, you know, where Aurora kind of stands in the larger scheme of the hemp and cannabis markets here, and they seem to be kind of playing third fiddle to Canopy and some of the other companies that are involved here. What's your take on some of these movements in the big weed sector? Uh-oh.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. There you go.
Okay.
What's your thoughts on some of these moves?
I thought it was a wrap when John Boehner was on the board of a largest cannabis holding company. I think he saw the money.
Now let me ask you this, dude. What kind of discussions do you think he has with Mitch McConnell?
I don't know. I don't think they were very friendly. I don't know.
Well, think about it, right? Because they're both like, you know, they're both you know, these are both Republicans, right? You know, and they're kind of partnered up, you know, with big industry in a lot of ways. Whether it's you know, in Boehner's situation, it's cannabis, and with McConnell, it's hemp, right? But both of these guys are kind of like part of the old boys network, both Republican.
So yeah, I think there's not as much money in, you know, the private prison, you know, game, you know, that they used to be in. So they got one, private prisons, and 2 opioids. They've kind of saturated.
Mm-hmm.
So I think this is their way of generating new income for themselves. At least that's my opinion.
You know, that makes sense, but you know, it's just interesting to me that, I mean, I'm just saying again, these are the guys. Oh God, hold on. I was trying to bring up the next item on the docket. I said, I don't know if it was my computer that did something weird, but these links here. So as I'm trying to hit the it's the 4th item on the docket. It's supposed to be about you know, the kind of, it's a follow-up to this article here. So give me just a second while I try to pull this up here.
All right.
Because it's a follow-up piece to what we're talking about here. And if you guys hear some popping and cracking in the background, somebody's decided they wanted to celebrate the 4th of July just a little early.
Well, that's about. Well, actually, it's close enough. Close enough. It was about a week. Week and a
Yeah,
little bit.
but like, dude, already? Let's see here.
Do people play Christmas music in October and November, or November, I should say?
No, bless you. No, not that early. I don't think they go that early. Let me see here. Let me try to get this article up. Oh, why is it legal pot market? Let me see here. Let me do another search here. Legal pot market. Because yeah, I'm gonna have to redo the docket down there because I'm not sure what went on with those links. But here we go. All right, let me get my screen share going, and let me mosey on over to the chat real quick. See if we got any questions or anything like that over
there. No questions so far.
Okay. All right. So let me go ahead and get my screen share back up here. And if you hear that in the background, that's not me using the bathroom, dude. That's just the pool.
Oh no, you can't hear it.
Okay, if you don't hear water like trickling in the background, dude. All right. All right. Do we see this here?
Yep, I can see it.
All right. Legal pot market to hit 40 billion US. US legalization will trigger giants buying cannabis companies. Oh boy. Oh boy.
This would be a good time for someone to put up a cannabis startup, you know what I mean? And just for the sole purpose of just selling it.
Dude, like you are you talking about like web 1.0 where people were like diapers,
just turn them out.
Yeah, diapers.com. Dude, there's a website just to sell diapers, and I forgot like how it got like it's like $60 million in funding or something like that. Diapers.com, dude.
Yeah, that's awesome.
All right. Global spending on legal cannabis will reach $40.6 billion by 2024, according to a new projection by ArcView Market Research and cannabis industry analysis firm BDS Analytics. The annual State of the Legal Cannabis Markets report released on Thursday is calling for the market to nearly triple. Wait, I think we got share back up here. Wait, do we have a echo in the background? That's not me using the bathroom, dude. That's just the pool.
Oh no, that's it's like yeah. If you want to turn off the stream, because we can.
We could, yeah. You gotta mute.
Yeah, you mute the stream.
I'll mute the screen.
No, yeah. mute. The YouTube window. Mute that one.
Okay. I think I've done that. Okay.
Okay. All right. Cool. All right. So the annual State of Legal Cannabis Markets report. Oh wait, I think I read that part. It's calling for the market to nearly triple from the 14.9 billion in spending that researchers projected for this year as legal sales gain momentum in more jurisdictions. North America will almost certainly continue producing the lion's share of legal spending, particularly as more U.S. markets transition from medical-only access for a limited pool to full legalization with sales open to all legal adults. Tom Adams, Managing Director of Industry Intelligence at BDS Analytics, wrote in a report. In Canada, ArcView and BDS are calling for total legal cannabis sales to reach 5.2 billion by 2024. Ontario is expected to account for the bulk of Canadian annual spending at 1.84 billion, followed by Alberta, British Columbia, and Quebec. Medical and adult use spending for 2018 was estimated to be $570 million. Canada legalized recreational cannabis sales on October 17, 2018. Though less spectacular than many had expected and smaller than forecast in previous editions of this report, Canada's launch of adult use cannabis should be considered a success, the report said. Despite initial supply chain shortages and regulatory hurdles, sales of legal adult use cannabis in Canada reached an estimated 113 million during the final 2.5 months. Dude, they made $113 million in just 2.5 months.
Yeah, and Also, remember, while they were selling it, they ran short of it, and they had to basically start doing a schedule on dispensary stores. So
Hmm.
probably they opened like 2 days a week and closed the remaining days because there wasn't enough cannabis to fill any stores. So there
Right.
was a huge shortage when they enacted the federal law. And with that, every store basically started scheduling days. They open days, they don't open. So that was a huge supply chain
Yeah.
problem itself.
Yeah. Nevada ran into something similar when basically when legal sales was well when shops opened up and sales were being taken. They ran into that very quickly. I think it was like within the first month or two they started talking about shortages.
Yeah. So what I always tell people is, if this can happen in Canada, just imagine if the federal laws in the United States are basically being lifted, and basically all states are now legally be able to sell marijuana in all states. There'll be a huge shortage in terms of, unless we properly handle it. But I believe there's going to be a huge shortage. The same way in Canada itself. So
Well,
it's
we'll
just
Well, I was gonna say there's another article we're gonna cover about some stuff that's going on in California, which is gonna give this just a little more shed a little more light on the subject because we can. I'm not trying to be a speculator, right? But it's a plant, right? So it goes bountiful and plentiful, right? So we can maybe even look at some of these shortages as quasi-engineered, but we'll get into that in a bit. Giants await U.S. legalization. Investors saw their cannabis stocks decline sharply in late 2018. It was followed by a rally in early 2019, fueled by the continuing consolidation in Canada and dramatic expansion of activity in the United States. The report said the year ahead will be shaped by many factors, including the continued evolution of cannabis retail in Canada, the rollout of the next generation of products like edibles and vape pens, and the federal election in October. With profits scarce, investors are rewarding revenue growth since it's indicative of the likelihood of making it into the top tier of companies big enough to survive when the industry growth slows to a more normal pace, Adams wrote. He cites Corona beer maker Constellation Brands' major investments in Canopy Growth as the date of cannabis investment growing up. The report expects the next graduation for publicly traded companies will be triggered by U.S. federal legalization. And I agree with that sentiment. When that happens, probably in the 2021 to 2024 period after the next national elections in the U.S., many more giants from the agricultural, consumer products, and retail sectors will step in to buy cannabis companies, delivering substantial payout to those daring enough to have started building them during the madhouse last days of federal prohibition, the report said. Noah, that kind of speaks to what you're saying. Like now would be the time to start up some companies just to sell them off.
yeah, and that's what's going on currently. Companies are basically starting up during this period, getting their licenses, basically getting the experience to basically grow cannabis itself, and also looking at Canada itself, looking at the laws and regulations in Canada. And remember, if it becomes legal here, our partner in Canada will be our export and import partner. So trade and all that will be coming from Canada and here.
No,
So
I'm sorry, go ahead and
so
finish.
so basically getting in early and learning. What I always tell people: start looking at the requirements in Canada, look at the requirements in trucking, look at the requirements in everything, and try to basically navigate the Canadian way. Because most likely, if it becomes legal and federally in the United States,
Mm-hmm.
you will mimic Canada itself, because Canada has gone through trials, and I've seen the mistakes from how when they legalize it, and they've seen the mistakes. And basically, in the United States, once it's legalized, you basically copy somebody who already gone through it and gone through the mistakes, and then they're your partner in terms of export and import. So you basically will mimic some of their laws and some of their mistakes in there.
But you know, when you speak to mimicking what they're doing, I mean, there's some of the things that we should be mimicking as of now.
Yeah,
But the problem is that because federally it's illegal, right?
yeah,
We don't actually have an import export market that Canada already has. We've covered in the past how you've got exports coming into, or should I say imports coming into Canada out of Africa.
yeah. What I'm saying is, start reading through the laws and start just looking at the laws itself and
Hmm.
basically preparing. I'm not saying you can't do it, just preparing.
Right, right,
Most companies currently are basically preparing for the future of cannabis. So they use that same principle, that same model followed by Canada, and try to implement in terms of preparing when cannabis becomes federally legal in the United States.
gotcha. And you know, do you think there could have been some discussions that were taking place between Trump and Trudeau over the past week when Trump met with him to talk about trade and stuff like that?
Trade, in terms of,
What, the cannabis or?
Do you think that might have been part of what was discussed? Or
Probably
was
not.
that
I
mainly
think they're just trying
Huawei
to
related?
avoid the
yeah,
new NAFTA just being, screwed up. I don't know
yeah,
if weed was discussed, but it's possible.
Okay.
it's possible, but I don't think it's he will be discussing that segment right now. He needs to deal with what's going on at home before he talks, basically going over the border and start talking about cannabis itself.
All right. All right. Well, this is from actually this is from ABC7, their Colorado affiliate. Colorado made $1 billion in marijuana tax revenue. I'm gonna say that again. Colorado made $1 billion in marijuana tax revenue. What could this mean for federal legalization? Colorado's marijuana industry has generated more than $1 billion in tax revenue for the state during the 5 years since legalizing the commercial sale of cannabis. According to a release from the state's Department of Revenue, Colorado has raised roughly $1.02 billion from taxes, licenses, and fees since 2014, with total sales exceeding $6.5 billion. For a state with an annual budget of $30 billion, the contribution from legalized marijuana, about 21 million per month, cannot be ignored. No shit. Democratic Governor Jared Polis said in a press release that Colorado is reaping the benefits of its thriving cannabis economy. This industry is helping grow our economy by creating jobs and generating valuable revenue that is going towards preventing youth consumption, protecting public health and safety, and investing in public school construction, he said. Marijuana has created more than 41,000 jobs in the state. Last year, it was responsible for contributing 125 million to the state's public school funds and 17.2 million to local governments. The windfall Colorado has seen from legalizing commercial sales of pot has raised the obvious question about what legalization could mean for the federal government. Tax experts explain that government revenue from cannabis is not a panacea for solving the country's budget issues, but it could certainly help. You know, no one's ever been touting this shit as like it's going to just all out save, the United States insatiable appetite for going into debt. No one ever said that, right? But from a state and local government standpoint, look, it would be more than helpful to have a very responsible legalized statute on the books. That's just my view on that. According to a study by Carl Davis, the research director at the Institute on Taxation and Economic Policy, a federal push to legalize marijuana and regulate commercial sales could potentially generate nearly $12 billion per year in state and local revenue. It's a meaningful amount of revenue, he said Thursday. You don't say. But you can't balance the budget based on cannabis taxes alone. The potential revenue from a pot tax would likely absorb less than 1.5% of the projected federal deficit. In Colorado, marijuana sales generated $263 million in state revenue last year, just shy of 1% of the total budget. A recent study by New Frontier Data estimated the government could generate $86 billion in federal tax revenue between 2019 and 2025 by legalizing cannabis in all 50 states for medical and adult use. With the deficit expected to balloon to $1 trillion by 2020, taxes on marijuana could reduce that figure by 1.4%. It's impractical to believe that cannabis tax revenue can be a silver bullet to address our nation's federal deficit, explained Justin Streckel, the political director of NORML, an advocacy group for reforming marijuana laws. But the sheer prospect of ending the federal prohibition of cannabis will result in increased revenues simply as a result of taking existing economic activity and putting it in a legal framework. In spite of federal marijuana prohibition, the government is already benefiting from the states that allow commercial cannabis. In the 8 states that regulate the sale and production of marijuana, companies and dispensaries must pay federal business taxes, payroll taxes, and sales taxes. According to Streckel, these companies pay an effective tax rate that is twice what other legal businesses pay. Partly, that is because cannabis companies cannot legally write off business expenses on their federal taxes, like transportation, rent, and employee benefits. Because their business is still prohibited under federal law, they are also cut off from the banking system, which also means no loans, plus the inconvenience and security risks of an entirely cash-based business. The cash cannabis could generate for the federal government will likely be comparable to revenue from alcohol and tobacco, about $10 billion to $14 billion respectively. Unlike alcohol and tobacco, there is no established consensus on how marijuana should be regulated. That's okay. We'll get in that. Each state that regulates the cannabis economy has a slightly different approach, and with the industry in its early stages, there's still a lot of room for experimentation. We're all settled on how to regulate tobacco and alcohol, said Richard Auxier, a research associate at the Tax Policy Center. There's no one single marijuana tax. The federal government's excise tax on tobacco is by the pound or per 100 cigars or cigarettes. For alcohol, the tax is per gallon, with a higher price for a higher proof. States similarly tax those products by weight and volume. States are still exploring different ways of calculating the right tax for marijuana. The majority of states charge a special excise tax on the price of the product, which some experts warn could be detrimental as the marijuana industry grows. For example, Colorado taxes cultivators 15% on the price of their contract, and customers pay a 15% tax on the retail price of the product. The state also collects the standard sales tax. So once again, Noah, that's the 3-tier tax. Right? So based on that alone, you're talking about 15,
right.
15, and then you add on top of that the standard sales tax.
Yeah, it'll look up to almost like 50% tax.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
Yeah. Alaska adopted a tax based on weight and charges cultivators $50 per ounce of cannabis. $50 an ounce, Jesus. Alaska adopted a tax based on weight charges cultivators $50 per ounce of cannabis flower produced. The state allows localities to levy an excise tax at the point of sale. Oh boy, here we go. California tax rates are based on both weight and price, with cultivators paying $9.25 per ounce of flower and customers paying 15% on the retail sale. And then there's also a county tax too. I need to mention that. Colorado has definitely figured out a way that's working for them, but it doesn't mean that it's the right way or the right way for every state, Auxier noted. There may be more than one good way to do this, and states and the federal government will have to think through the pros and cons of a variety of possibilities. According to Davis, taxing marijuana by weight is going to hold up a lot better over the long run compared with taxing the price. We know what prices are already falling for cannabis. We already know that prices are already falling for cannabis, and they're going to continue to fall significantly, he said. Prices in Colorado have already dropped from $1,874 per pound of cannabis flower in 2014 to $781 per pound. Wow. As more states consider legalization, a well-designed cannabis tax that holds up over the long run is key. More in our report, and then it has a link here to. Let me see if I can get that link there, and I'll go ahead and post it in the chat. All right, you guys, what's your take?
In terms of the taxes, that's been going on, and yes, Colorado has $1 billion from taxes, but imagine the losses they have from illegal sales of the marijuana. Because of the high taxes, the illegal sales are basically jumping up higher right now. Even in California, with more taxes, basically more people are now moving, instead of going into the legal side of cannabis. They're deciding, okay, the taxes are so much and so high, I'm just going back to basically growing in my backyard illegally or do something. And the black market right now is basically increasing. And as that's one of the problems in legal cannabis. It's either its requirements, banking, and taxes. And the taxes are killing both California, Colorado, and anybody in the cannabis space. The taxes are killing them. And because of that, the black market right now is basically seeing a huge jump, a huge spike. And that's where the problem is. And since it's not federally regulated, the state can impose any kind of taxes on them. And basically, the cannabis business owner can't do anything but just take it. And that's what's going on.
Okay. I see the Gone has joined us. Okay, he might be muted. Noah?
Well, let's go to the next article, and then we can circle back to that.
Okay.
Because there's a little bit to it.
Okay. Well, this next article actually kind of follows up on what Cannabis was just speaking to the black market. And I think I've kind of talked a little bit about what's been going on here in California as a result of passage of Prop 64 and how basically the black market has blown up because of just, high prices due to a whole bunch of taxes being levied and subpar flower, basically. 20 tons, I repeat, 20 tons of illegal cannabis seized near Buellton in Santa Barbara County, authorities say. See, when we talk about the shortages, 20 tons, I say shortage my ass. Authorities from the Santa Barbara County Sheriff's Department last week seized about 20 tons of cannabis and 350,000 plants on a plot of land outside of Buellton in the Santa Ynez Valley after a 2-month investigation into a fraudulent growing operation, officials said. Detectives believe the growers obtained fraudulent temporary and provisional cannabis licenses for cultivation on about 187 acres of land. God damn. With more than 60 acres being used for the cultivation of cannabis, according to a news release from the department. It took 4 days to seize the cannabis and destroy about 350,000 plants, some of which were ready to harvest, the department said. Authorities executed 4 search warrants, including in the city of Santa Maria in San Luis Obispo County and in the 1800 block of West Highway 246 outside Buellton. The investigation was the result of complaints and tips from the public. Snitches. The owner of the property hasn't been located, the department said. The department said. Santa Barbara County officials have tried to lure cannabis cultivation to the area, and farms in the county hold 35% of all cultivation licenses issued in the state last year, despite only having 1.8% of the state's land. County supervisors voted not to limit the size and number of growing operations and decided to tax them based off of gross revenue instead of licensed square footage. As a result, some wine tasting rooms in the area downwind of growers can be filled with the smell of pot. If you guys don't know, man, that area is largely there's a lot of wineries and vineyards down there. But they're saying the sheer amount of weed that's being grown, the wind carries the smell downstream, And so the people who go to like the wine tasting events and all that, they're just in there smelling weed all day. And rolling vineyards in country estates are interrupted by rows of plastic covered grow houses. The Santa Barbara County District Attorney's Office is reviewing the case to decide if criminal charges will be filed. The operation was a multi-agency. Jesus Christ. Wow. The operation was a multi-agency effort, which included the California Department of Fish and Wildlife and the Army National Guard Counter-Drug Task Force. All right, there's an ad. Okay, so that kind of speaks to what we were just talking about here. Not only the black market, right, that's proliferating as a result of increased prices, because what we're looking at here is we're looking at the price of the marijuana itself actually dropping, but on the consumer end, the price actually going up because of the sheer amount of taxes. See, so now you've created a situation that's ripe for a black market. And when we talk about shortages and shortage of supply and all that, dude, 20 tons?
True.
All right, let's open it up for discussion, man. What's your take?
Was that me or Kevin?
Oh, yeah, anyone.
Okay, I would say for this, this is the kind of I wouldn't say death kiss to it, but it's kind of the major issue is that for a long time they made sure that it was illegal, right? And then now that it's became legal, they're trying to, tax it into becoming illegal again, essentially. So they just got, or they're getting greedy with the revenue. So what they need to figure out is a way for them to generate income, right? They can even be as high as the kind of taxes that they have on cigarettes, but not so much that the black market gets a leg up on the competition. Because then if that the black market is cheaper, people are going to be buying more from there than the legal distributors. And then if their sales go down, and they're out of business, then there's even more profit for the black market. And the reason they wanted to make it legal is to bring it out of the black market. So it's completely counterintuitive, and they're going about it the wrong way or backwards. It's like they were making a plan to grow the black market, essentially.
Go, Cannabis.
In terms of the states, what I'll say, it's Colorado is a good example in terms of how legalization might affect in terms of federally. And recently everybody keeps talking about the recession and how a recession is coming. So I always use this example. So a recession comes, Colorado still makes money in terms of cannabis sales. South Carolina looks at it and says, this dude is making money from cannabis and my people are suffering. I need to make sure this is legal so I can get revenue from this. And that's a cascading effect to different states. And that's how federally you might get it being legal over time. When there's enough economic hardship facing different states, and the goal is to look for source of revenues to basically satisfy states' budgets and all that, they will look for another avenue, and probably the avenue will be, say, cannabis. And since it's been shown with Colorado and probably California and other states, now there are 11 states that have recreational and medical. And if the data shows enough profit, even though it's basically taxed to the T, you will see ships and states start falling and saying, okay, we are seeing high revenues from these states. We need to start legalizing, creating more jobs, creating more access, and that's the way I think that might help in terms of what's going on in terms of cannabis and all the states and regulation itself and taxes.
I don't know. Is it going? I think Nagon might still be muted. So
Actually, there's a question for you in the chat. I don't know if you can see it.
Oh, okay. Is there any money in the transporting delivery of marijuana? What are they doing for security of the crops? Okay, well, yeah, there's money in it. I mean, these are part of some of the sub industries, right? In the cannabis industry, right? Transportation is going to be
courier service.
Yeah, courier services, and then also security. So
in
things
Detroit,
like.
In
Oh, go ahead.
Detroit, two security firms opened up. They made probably a couple of $1 million basically in their first year or 2 years in running their security agency in terms of garden cannabis in Detroit currently, and they were just doing medical. And remember, Michigan just enacted the adult use, and the laws are basically being finalized. So remember, just medical, and they had already big profit margins from security. So security is going to be a huge industry in the cannabis, especially since most banks don't collect money from cannabis businesses. So
are they like armed security, or what kind of security are we talking about?
Armed security, even security. Yeah, really armed security. These are just basic armed security. They guard your basically your store, your dispensary, anything dealing with cannabis. Even when you're transferring money from one place to another, you have hired basically security too. So these are hired guns and hired individuals who basically help secure your dispensary or to secure your cannabis business.
Right. So who's usually? Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but who's doing that? Is it small, upstarts? Are we talking G4S
small
or
upstarts like in Detroit and all that? And in some of my videos, I talked about security. In my channel, I talked about security, and I also talked about cybersecurity and how that and also data analytics will be helped in security systems too. So these are small startups, and also small startups. Anybody who's especially in the courier service and also security, there's a huge market in that, especially in Chicago. If you look at the laws in Chicago that were just enacted like 3-4 weeks ago,
yeah,
there are laws in terms of courier service. And if you look at the laws and you can basically calculate how many, like, they tell you how many licenses are basically being given for cultivators, processing, and a dispensary. And if you can look at it and say, okay, these are the amount of licenses that's going to be needed for that, if you can grab a license for a courier service, you can go and market directly to the individuals who gets the licenses for dispensary and all that, and basically make a huge profit from that. So there's a huge profit in terms of courier services and security, especially basically anything ancillary dealing in the cannabis space where you don't directly touch with it. There's a huge market and a huge profit margin in that.
Yeah, all the money isn't necessarily in just like growing it and operating a dispensary. There's so many other aspects to the industry that can be explored, and there's a lot of money. Yeah,
like the same where the person who during the gold rush, it wasn't the people that made the money. It wasn't the people that actually mined the gold. It was the people who sold the shovel. It's the same thing here. You don't need to touch the product itself to make huge amounts of money. Ancillary people who just walk around them make a lot of money from it, from trucking, transportation, to even cybersecurity. Individuals who want to go into tech, especially tech, because one of the biggest problems is the requirements. And individuals in tech, I think tech is a bridgeway between requirements, laws requirements, and basically the cannabis industry. They bridge that way. If you know data analytics and all that, you can help a lot of cannabis industries help with basically requirements and laws. And there's a lot of money in terms of people who you don't need to directly touch the product itself.
Right. Okay, I'm gonna get into this next article. And this was submitted by Mike V. Restrictive Massachusetts guidelines on selling CBD products worry hemp farmers. Jonathan McDougall of Bay Grown Farms in Rochester refurbishes cranberry bogs to grow hemp, an attempt to rejuvenate a struggling industry. His company recently worked with a local produce farm to create a new line of CBD-infused strawberry jam. But after the Massachusetts Department of Agriculture Resources last week released a policy statement banning the sale of CBD-infused food, McDougall expects to lose the thousands of dollars he put into developing the jam. We just invested in a whole line of edibles we can't even sell, McDougall said. Massachusetts lawmakers are taking steps to make it easier for farmers to grow hemp, which was legalized in Massachusetts in 2016 and federally in 2018. But at the same time, the state agency charged with regulating agriculture put out new guidelines that could severely limit the size of the state's hemp market by banning the sale of certain products. Farmers, retailers, and manufacturers said the new rules could make it impossible for small farmers to enter the hemp industry. Massachusetts farmers just aren't going to be able to compete with these regulations, said Julia Agron, an Amherst farmer and outreach coordinator in the Northeast Sustainable Hemp Association. The new policy statement says growers and manufacturers can sell hemp seeds and its derivatives, clothing, building materials, and fibers. A grower can sell flower to another grower or processor. But growers cannot sell flower meant to be used by the consumer, such as for smoking. What? What's the point? Growers cannot sell CBD-infused food, animal feed with hemp products, hemp as a dietary supplement, or any CBD product for which they make medicinal claims. Cannabidiol, or CBD, is a part of the cannabis plant that is thought to produce relaxation but cannot get someone high. The prohibition on food stems from a Department of Public Health statement prohibiting adding CBD to food based on federal rules by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. The problem, farmers say, is that CBD is the most lucrative part of the hemp market. Agron, who runs a small hemp farm, said the market for industrial hemp is already dominated by large farms in agricultural states. The only way for a small Massachusetts farm to be viable is to sell artisanal craft products, such as high-quality flower for smoking. I agree. Although someone cannot get high from smoking hemp, it is smoked, sometimes by people looking to stop smoking cigarettes. While Agron's farm can produce cosmetics or topical creams, she said the market significantly shrinks if farmers cannot sell their crop for edible products. If we can grow artisanal product and get top dollar, we can survive as a micro farm, Agron said. If we have to sell to a processor and processes it into hemp oil, we won't make enough to cover our costs of getting licenses and plants. Business owners say the timing of the new statement is also problematic since farmers already started growing this season. The Department of Agriculture Resources has issued 102 licenses to grow or process hemp in 2019. Linda Noel of Terrapin Farm in Franklin is in her second year of growing hemp. She had a contract to sell flower to a company that wanted to infuse it in herbal tea, but the Massachusetts Department of Agriculture Resources denied that company a license, so she is unable to sell her crop. This is a completely misguided policy, Noel said. Zach McGinnis, vice president and co-founder of the Healing Rose in Newburyport, sells cosmetics and body care products. The company had hoped to expand into foods and tinctures, but the new MDAR rules trampled on those dreams a bit, McGinnis said. McGinnis said he worries that out-of-state companies will import products that Massachusetts companies are not allowed to develop. If he were allowed to manufacture things like CBD capsules or tinctures, McGinnis said, we could easily triple our revenue right now. Kirby Mastrangelo, who owns Hempire, which sells hemp products in Methuen and Amesbury, said the guidelines are also confusing. For example, it's unclear whether CBD-derived tinctures or capsules are prohibited. State officials said the state guidelines are partially dependent upon federal rules. Brendan Moss, a spokesperson for Governor Charlie Baker, said in a statement, the Baker-Polito administration recently issued policy guidance regarding the sale of hemp-derived products in the Commonwealth, consistent with the previously announced federal policy, and looks forward to working with the FDA, state agencies, and local boards of health to ensure all products in Massachusetts comply with applicable federal and state laws and regulations. Rep. William Smitty Pignatelli, Democrat, chairman of the Joint Committee on Environment, Natural Resources, and Agriculture, introduced a bill which passed in the House Wednesday to allow farmers to grow hemp on agricultural land. Pignatelli said he thinks part of the issue with CBD is the lack of scientific evidence on its effects. There's a lot of unanswered questions. There's a lot of science we need to delve into. Pignatelli said he thinks MDR is trying to hit the pause button to allow time for more thorough analysis of the pros and cons of CBD oil. Jesus Christ, man, what rock have they been living under? Rep. David Rogers, Democrat, chairman of the Joint Committee on Cannabis Policy, said lawmakers will take a careful look at the new guidelines and the legislature could consider passing a new law regulating or allowing CBD products. He said it is a complex issue because of the intersection of state and federal law. At the same time, Rogers said it's one more product in commerce that could generate revenue and jobs for farmers. Now, you know, the interesting thing about this is they keep deferring to like Fed law, Fed law, Fed law. Well, Fed basically put it in the hands of the Department of Agriculture, right, as of the 2018 Farm Bill.
Yeah, they're ducking. That's why.
That's exactly what. That's why I'm like, dude, they're just kind of playing dodgeball with all of this, right? So, you know, I think what you have is you just have certain lobby groups, right, that support other industries and stuff, kind of injecting or you know, interjecting into the growth and development of the hemp and CBD market, particularly in Massachusetts, and that's kind of what it sounds like to me. What's your guys' take on this?
Yeah, that's also exactly my thoughts. I think maybe they're trying to slow walk it because there's some other interests that are trying to get involved in it, or you know, they just have a something culturally against it in their city because of the people who are in power at the current moment. I think it could be something to that effect. I don't think it's an honest, we're just following the federal law on it kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think they got medical, like 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, they had more than enough time to figure it out by now.
Right. That's why I'm like, okay, what's really going on here? Because I don't know if that's what I don't necessarily think I see it that way, given that you've already you legalized the medical application of it.
Daddy,
Yes.
Sparkle needed to go outside, but you're outside here, so she took it in here.
Oh
But
gosh.
she won't go out here because you're in here.
Dude.
Can you just go in your room?
Hold on 1 second. All right. Well, give me a minute. I don't know why the dog doesn't want to come outside and poop. Sorry, guys. Yeah, I'm not sure like what the hang up is, you know, considering that you've already legalized it from cannabis anyway for medicinal purposes, right? You did that. So why is the CBD market such a hemp-derived CBD market such a tough nugget to crack? I don't get it.
It's not, but the problem, the issue with the CBD is it's federally legal, but the specifics on testing because you remember, in order for it to be considered hemp, it has to be a THC level of 0.03%. So now it's up to the state to figure out the specifics in terms of testing, in terms of basically what to do, basically specifics. So now the state the state basically each state might say, okay, I'm going to make it a little bit harder, a little bit tougher, just some way to basically either deter it or something with it. And even now, since it's legal, you can take it across state line. And with that, that's the problem. You can take it across state line. What are the benefits? Because since cannabis itself, not hemp, when cannabis is not legal, it's not federally legal, the profit just remains in the state. But now that it's federal, hemp now is federal, the profit doesn't just stick to the state. It can go across state lines. So right now, that problem is in there for each state to determine what they need to do in terms of the laws, even though it's federally legal for hemp. But state has to decide specifically testing and all that. And that's where the big issue comes in. How do I test to make sure this meets the setting federal state criteria? And that's where that's why I always tell people, that's where you need to ask questions. Basically, the testing methodology in that, and go from there.
Right. Okay, let's move to the next article. 1 second.
Okay, you guys, give me just a second.
No, it's okay. I'll put on the next article real quick. 1 second. Let me know if you guys can see it though. All right. Can you guys see it?
I don't think so.
Okay. Yeah, I can see it. Oh, actually, give me 1 second. We already did that one. Oh, okay. Oh, good.
I was gonna say I had the other article queued up here. I was just moving from outside to inside here.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and bring it up right now. Give me just a second. Oh, wait, wrong window. Here we go. All right, let's see here. Okay, we see this here?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Congress votes to block feds from enforcing marijuana laws in legal states. So looks like we're inching closer and closer here to some sort of change in the federal statutes here. The House of Representatives approved a far-reaching measure on Thursday to prevent the Department of Justice from interfering with state marijuana laws, including those allowing recreational use, cultivation, and sales. The amendment, which also shields cannabis laws in Washington, D.C. and U.S. territories, is now attached to a large-scale appropriations bill to fund parts of the federal government for fiscal year 2020. The inclusion of adult use programs presents a significant expansion of an existing policy that protects only local medical cannabis laws from federal intervention, which was first enacted in 2014 and has since been extended through annual spending bills. The broader rider was approved in a floor vote, 267 to 165, a tally that is considered by legalization supporters to be an indication of how much support there is in Congress for more comprehensive and permanent changes to federal marijuana policies. This is the most significant vote on marijuana reform policy that the House of Representatives has ever taken, said Normal Political Director Justin Streckel. Hey, there's that guy again. Today's action by Congress highlights the growing power of the marijuana law reform movement and the increasing awareness by political leaders that the policy of prohibition and criminalization has failed. Cannabis Trade Federation CEO Neil Levine agreed with the importance of the legislative victory. The historic nature of this vote cannot be overstated, he said. For the first time, a chamber of Congress has declared that the federal government should defer to state cannabis laws. Actually, the Cole memo would have actually been the first time that was in effect, but that's neither here nor there. Aaron Smith, executive director of the National Cannabis Industry Association, called the vote without a doubt the biggest victory for federal cannabis policy reform to date, and a hopeful sign that the harmful policies of marijuana prohibition will soon be a relic of the past. The measure is sponsored by Reps Earl Blumenauer, Eleanor Holmes Norton, and Tom McClintock. Yeah, I'm familiar with that name. He's from California. Would bar the Department of Justice from spending money to prevent states and territories from implementing their own laws that authorize the use, distribution, possession, or cultivation of marijuana. In 2015, a nearly identical measure came just 9 flip votes short of passage on the House floor. Since then, a number of states with full legalization laws has more than doubled, meaning that far more lawmakers now represent constituents who stand to benefit from its protections. The end of marijuana prohibition has never been closer. When Drug Policy Alliance and a small band of allies first worked on this amendment in 2015, we were told that we didn't stand a chance. DPA Director of National Affairs Michael Collins said, but we convinced members that this was the right thing to do, and 4 years on, victory is sweet. Now is the time for Democrats to pivot to passing legislation that will end prohibition through a racial justice lens, making sure that the communities most impacted by our racist marijuana laws have a stake in the future of legalization, he said. To do anything less would be to repeat an injustice. On Wednesday, the House approved a similar amendment protecting the marijuana laws of Indian tribes by a voice vote, and no member requested a roll call vote. So that language is now attached to the spending bill. We're watching the growth of this industry, a multi-billion-dollar industry. We're watching state after state move forward, Blumenauer said in a floor debate on the State Protection Amendment on Wednesday evening. Every one of us on the floor of the House who are here now represent areas that have taken action. We have been embedded in our legislation protections for medical marijuana, and this would simply extend that same protection to prevent the Department of Justice interfering with adult use. I strongly urge that we build on the legacy that we have had in the past, that we move this forward to allow the federal government to start catching up to where the rest of the states are. In a letter circulated to colleagues prior to the vote, McClintock wrote that the issue at hand is whether the federal government has the constitutional authority to dictate policy to states on an issue which occurs strictly within their own borders. I do not believe the federal government has that authority, but even if it did, states should determine their own criminal justice policies, he wrote. This is how our constitutional system was designed to function. Don Murphy, director of federal policies for the Marijuana Policy Project, said Blumenauer and McClintock deserve credit for their early leadership on marijuana policy reform, which dates back to the days when it was just good policy, not good politics, too. The fate of the cannabis measures in the state is unknown for now. Historically, that chamber's Appropriations Committee has been relatively open to attaching marijuana riders to spending bills and has consistently approved the medical cannabis protections. But the body's Republican leadership may be reluctant to take the further step of also tying the Justice Department's hands when it comes to enforcing federal prohibition against licensed businesses and consumers in states that allow recreational marijuana use and sales. House Democratic leadership urged their confidence in support of the measure in a whip email on Thursday, and only 8 members of the party voted against it. While the majority of Republicans voted against the rider, 41 GOP members supported it. The passage of the State Protection Amendment comes despite congressional offices receiving an 11th hour email saying Greenwich Biosciences, maker of Food and Drug Administration approved CBD-based medication, Epidiolex, wanted lawmakers to defeat it. Interesting. So, Big Pharma seems to have a problem with this. The message to congressional staff claimed that the measure is overly broad and could be interpreted as impacting the ability of the Department of Justice to assist the FDA with any enforcement action that may need to be taken to ensure public safety. Oh, so they're all about public safety. Anyway. But Collins of DPA pointed out that if that were true, it would also apply to the current medical cannabis rider that's been part of a federal law for nearly 5 years. It doesn't pass the laugh test, he said. Who are Dems going to side with, Big Pharma or people trying to end the drug war? A company media representative didn't respond to a phone message seeking comment. Earlier on Thursday, the House approved an amendment from Rep. Jerry McNerney that directs the Food and Drug Administration to establish a process for regulating CBD in foods and dietary supplements. Another measure passed in a voice vote from Rep. AOC shifts $5 million away from the Drug Enforcement Administration towards an opioid treatment program. Gangster. In addition, Ocasio-Cortez amendment aimed at removing barriers to research on psychedelic drugs such as psilocybin and MDMA was soundly defeated in the House floor last week. Yeah, she was trying to push for like the legalization of like magic mushrooms. The House is set to consider another amendment on the spending legislation in the coming days that would allow military veterans to receive medical marijuana recommendations from Department of Veteran Affairs doctors. A separate spending bill moving through the House already contains language to protect banks from being punished for working with state legal cannabis businesses and removes a long-standing rider that has prevented Washington, D.C. from spending its own local tax dollars to legalize and regulate marijuana sales. Meanwhile, standalone cannabis legislation is also advancing. The comprehensive marijuana banking bill was cleared by the Financial Services Committee in March and is expected to receive a floor vote next month. The Veteran Affairs Committee held a hearing on 4 separate pieces of legislation concerning cannabis and military veterans on Thursday, and Small Business Committee hosted a Wednesday hearing on issues facing cannabis firms, with the panel's chairwoman announcing she would soon file a bill on the issue. It's a lot going on, man. A lot going on. You know, they're really trying to push from multiple angles here. At the Fed change its tune on this, and you see Big Pharma trying to throw their weight around as well. What are your gentlemen's thoughts?
You want to go first, brother?
I'm sure. Yeah, the bill itself basically defunded the DOJ from being prosecuting basically anybody in the cannabis industry itself. So it's still federally legal, but if you don't have money to basically come after somebody, they're just gonna ignore you. So there isn't any incentive. So that's just removing any incentive to basically target cannabis business. Basically, it becomes too expensive. And by the DOJ basically defunding DOJ, then DOJ states, hey, okay, we're gonna leave it to the states to prosecute anybody who's basically a cannabis business. And if the state says, hey, it's legal, then they're not going to pursue you. So basically, that bill basically just defunds. Basically, it's something like the Farm Bill, but this time it just defunds the DOJ itself from basically pursuing any kind.
Right.
I think that's what's going on right now. It's just a way. It's just a way to move that needle to legalization little by little. Just finding ways to just move that needle to full legalization. And yeah, Big Pharma is going to stop it because there's a lot of money on the table. And when there's a lot of money on the table, there's always going to be opposition in there. Even with right now with the opioid crisis. And if you can come up with cannabis as a alternative, a healthy alternative, you'll probably have some pushback, and that's where the Big Pharma is pushing back. So that's what you should expect. But right now, you're just seeing that needle shifting towards federal legalization.
Yep.
It might not happen this year, but it will happen soon enough.
Well, I mean, you could see it, man. They're kind of pushing from all angles. So it's at this point, to me, in my view, it's an inevitability.
And even right now, I think they're having some laws being enacted about the banking issue.
Yeah.
Right now, banks banking and a lot of money is basically being moved, and they want to have that control on it. So right now, they're looking at even trying to basically regulate how basically to deal with cannabis and banking issues, because there's a lot of problems with banking and a lot of problems money circulating. So right now, the goal of the federal government is trying to see how to basically deal with that issue. And I think it's coming up real soon. So we're going to see that too, coming in from the banking to the laws to all that. Then that's that needle shifting to the point where then at one point it becomes federal legal, and it will happen, but happen real soon. But I always tell people, be prepared. I always tell, in terms of the businesses, the money is in the details. Look at the laws and requirements. Look at all that,
right.
and see where you can solve problems in it, and go from there.
Right, and especially there has been some pushback by the pharma industry, but it doesn't look as robust as I thought it was going to be. So I'm guessing soon enough they're going to start panicking, because they made the money going up during the the opioid crisis, and then now they have some anti-opioid or recovery medication that they've manufactured or in the process of perfecting right now. So they want to also sell that on the back end, for the therapy. So they're going to come in strong at
Yeah,
some point. Yeah.
and it's not only affecting even the big pharma, it's also affecting the alcohol industry. Since the inaction of cannabis, sales of alcohol is dropping, and sales of cannabis is going up. So there's a lot of push, not a lot of huge pushback, but the cannabis industry is going to expect some pushback. But the promotion, how they promote cannabis is basically being in terms of the big pharma, as being a more healthy alternative than getting hooked up on opioids. Or the alcohol industry. Instead of basically destroying your liver, you can have this, and gives you the same euphoria, but with less harmful side effects. So cannabis will probably push that healthy alternative in terms of the marketing, and then that's where the problem comes in big pharma and the alcohol industry itself.
Yeah. All right, we're going to get to the final item on the docket here. And oddly enough, man, if you look to the right there, another CBD advertisement. Farmers struggle with hemp grain, hang hopes on fiber and CBD. Farmers are questioning whether growing hemp for grain will ever be profitable in Wisconsin, but say there could be a future in hemp and fiber and CBD products. Are these dudes living under a rock or something? Well, maybe there's a future in it. Duh. The Wisconsin Department of Agriculture, Trade, and Consumer Protection has issued more than 1,300 licenses to grow industrial hemp in 2019. Wisconsin Public Radio reports that summer rains last year ruined about 20 Wisconsin farmers' chances at producing sellable hemp grain. Veracoa farmer Levon Felton says he didn't sell any of the grain he harvested in 2018, and that the endeavor cost him at least 20 grand. Agronomist Brian Parr says Wisconsin's climate might work better for farmers producing hemp fiber once that market grows. Parr says hemp for CBD products could also prove lucrative, although farmers say this market is limited too. I think there was an accompanying video that went along with this, but this is some of what's going on in places like Wisconsin, where they went all in on hemp production. I think it was in 2015. I think that was when they went ahead and passed their own state sanctioned bill with regards to it, but it was only to produce like hemp grain and stuff like that. It wasn't for full-on processing of the plant, the fibers, flour, CBD oil, and all that type of stuff. So I think now with the 2018 hemp bill being passed, farmers are now looking to cultivate the plant in hopes of actually angling to put the cultivated products or harvested products, let's just say, into those segments of the industry. You know, the actual consumable flower, the CBD oil, and then also hemp fibers. Now, as far as fibers go, I don't really know how much of a textile industry that we have, right? Where people are kind of clamoring for like biomass and fiber to produce, you know, things. But, you know, we do see that the demand for CBD is robust right about now. But this is just kind of like some supplemental stuff. We already kind of spoke to that part of the industry. Did you guys have any thoughts here? This is the last item on the docket, and we can kind of maybe chat it up about some stuff.
No, nothing on my end. I think we already covered this kind of in the beginning with the second article. It was very similar.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's just kind of more of like a follow up here. But let's head on over to the chat here, man, before we close out. Okay. Hey, Paul, what's going on? Andy, Gregory Wyatt, Joey T. What's going on, guys? So yeah, so that pretty much kind of covers what we had on the docket for this Black Cannabis Talk. Again, we're just kind of covering some of the movements, you know, with regards to the industry here in the States and elsewhere, Canada, over the last 2 weeks since the last hangout we did. I promise for the next one, we'll bring back the strain review. I'll try to get something cool to review, and we'll have some more news bits. And I think also I want to try to maybe talk a little bit about actual growing and cultivating, maybe take just a slight departure from some of the news items, and then maybe actually talk about some of the hands-on of growing a plant, and, you know, how to grow it, you know, and all the various ways to do it and stuff like that. So maybe we'll kind of depart a little bit and then kind of go into something like that for the next hangout. With that, we're going to go ahead and close out. Thank you guys for tuning in. Tomorrow we have space and technology, so we'll be back at it tomorrow, 5 p.m. Well, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. I think that's usually when we do it. Yeah. So with that being said, you guys have a good night. Peace.
Definitely. I'll catch you guys tomorrow.